Shabbat Shalom from Temple Concord. This week our Torah portion takes us in a whole different direction. We meet Joseph and we find that Joseph is filled with tricks. He has many of his father's worst traits, but in the end he also has some of his father's greatest traits. But first, all of the trickery. He has the dreams where he talks about his brothers serving him. His brothers get upset, they put him in a pit, they tell his father that he's been sold, that he's been killed, and he's actually been sold, and he goes down to Egypt. And there he encounters Mrs. Potiphar. Joseph was a bright man, and Joseph had a challenge because on the one hand he was a stranger in a strange land and he needed all the help he could get. On the other hand, he was trying to be true to himself. And he knew he had this history of being favored and of these tricks being played. And yet it didn't stop him from falling into more traps. So what happens? Well, he finds himself doing pretty well and ends up as a servant in the Potiphar's household. And the next thing you know, Mrs. Potiphar is making eyes at him and he's not interested. And he says, no, no, no. And Mrs. Potiphar gets upset and says to her husband, this guy is trying to do something to me. And the next thing you know, old Joseph is in jail, accused of something he didn't do. And on the one hand, it looks like divine justice, because here he has been tricking his whole life, he has been conniving his whole life, and finally he has been outmaneuvered. And at the same time, it seems patently wrong, because he actually had done nothing wrong. And so what do we do with that? What do we do when we find a result that we didn't deserve? What do we do when, even if we deserved it up to a point, at the point that it actually happens, we were clean? How do we live with those challenges? Or to put it a different way, how do we live with the notion that life isn't fair? Did Joseph deserve his fate? Did he do something to bring that fate upon himself? And how do we deal with it in our own lives when things just don't seem fair? I hear it all the time with my children. Isn't fair, this one got this and that one got that. And did they get an equal size this and an equal present of that and all of those things? And their questions are very real. And I don't know that we ever solve them except to recognize that life isn't fair. And that there are times when we have it good, and as Joseph teaches us, when things are really good, we've got to prepare and put that goodness in the bank, if you will. And when things are bad, we withdraw from the bank, and we use the good times to carry us through. And we recognize that there are going to be moments in life when things aren't fair, and we've got to suffer through that indignity, and then there are going to be times when things are more than fair our way, and we can't let our heads get too big. And this becomes the lesson of how to live with what we have, whether it's what we want or more than we want, or not what we want. And in the whole story, you find interesting little sidebars. So Mrs. Potiphar doesn't quite figure out what she wants. She wants one thing, she doesn't get it, and so she's got to live with that inequality. The brothers want one thing, they don't get it, and they've got to live with that unfairness. And on and on and on. Each character seems to have that same little problem. And all of it, I think, comes to tell us that life sends us in interesting directions. And the question isn't, where do we end up, but how do we handle ourselves once we're in that situation? So Joseph lands himself in jail, or finds himself in jail. What does he do with it? Does he just bemoan his fate, or does he actually work through the problem? And that's where Joseph's brilliance shines. And that's the lesson for all of us. That life isn't fair, but what is fair and what we do have control over is how we respond to what's happening in our own lives. And that's the piece that we need to listen and follow Joseph on as much as we can. Because Joseph, among many of his great attributes, maybe his greatest, was his ability to play the hand in front of him, no matter what the circumstances. I hope you'll join us for Shabbat services this Friday evening. It's the first Friday of the month of December, so we'll be in the chapel at 7:30, followed by an oneg afterwards with our wonderful temple punch, so you'll want to have some of that. Saturday morning we have Tot Shabbat services at 9 o'clock. We have our text study at 9 also. We have Torah study at 10. We have Shabbat morning services at 11. And on Sunday evening, Hanukkah begins. But before that, on Sunday morning, we have the next in our Jewish History Through Cooking class. I'll be cooking alongside Chef Steve Samuels. He's actually doing most of the cooking. I'll be doing the talking. We're talking about the Roman era in Jewish history, and he's going to be making a very interesting fish dish and an artichoke dish from the Roman period. That will be Sunday morning. Sunday evening, we'll light the first candle of Hanukkah. And next Friday night, we'll celebrate our Temple Hanukkah dinner, which is a wonderful evening for our whole congregation. I hope you can join us. We have services at 6, followed by a Hanukkah dinner and lots of fun. For now, though, I wish you a Shabbat of playing the hand you have in front of you. Whether the hand is the one you think you want or the one you think you deserve is secondary. What's primary is playing that hand well. And I hope this is a Shabbat of recognizing that your hand can be played well regardless of what is actually in that hand. Shabbat Shalom for now. Look forward to seeing you in the temple.